The Legacy of the Human War. The room was smaller than she expected, filled with bookcases and artifacts. Sitting down, she took a good look at the former Lord Admiral. His feathers, now tinged with silver, marked his age and wisdom. "Thank you for allowing me this interview, Lord Admiral Koku," she said, dipping her head slightly. Koku smiled, his small fangs peeking out in a rare show of openness. "Please, Miss Herrick, just Koku will suffice. It's been a long time since I held that title." She nodded. "All right, Koku. Do you mind if we begin?" He waved his hand. "By all means." Miss Herrick took a moment to compile her questions and activate her recording program. "You were the lead admiral in the Gamma Aquin cluster campaign. Can you give us a quick summary of the factors leading up to the conflict?" Koku sat back, looking out the window. 2 decades ago, we came into conflict with the Federated Systems, the human government, over a small but strategically important cluster to our galactic east. When the humans staked their claim there, our assembly reacted badly. There were some token negotiations, but in the end, the politicians trusted the military more than the diplomats. "So you immediately declared war on the Federated Systems?" she asked. "Yes," he replied, "but it's important to nuance that statement. War in those days meant something different to us. We expected to fight some token battles and then take the systems and the industry with minimal loss of life. That's how it had gone between major galactic powers for centuries. We knew the humans were militarily inferior, so we didn't expect the strategic disaster we found ourselves in." "I see. So what happened that turned the campaign into such a disaster?" she asked. "Have you ever heard of Quintus Flavus Maximus?" Koku asked. When she shook her head, he continued, "He was a human military tactician who lived millennia ago. He famously avoided battle with a feared enemy, harassing him and preserving his own forces while weakening the enemy." "And this is what happened in the Gamma Aquin cluster?" she asked. "Yes, to an extent. The leader of the human forces, Commodore Ruth Bailey, knew she couldn't face us in open battle. All she had was a heavy cruiser and 2 light carriers as frontline battle units. We figured she'd surrender as soon as we entered the HFY system, but when we jumped in, there was nobody there except for automated weapons platforms and mines." "And the drones," he added with a shudder. "Did you know a human light carrier can hold up to 3,000 combat drones? Absolutely mad, I tell you." She directed him back. "And how did this impact the campaign as a whole?" "It slowed us down. We thought them cowardly for fleeing from battle, but they seemed adamant on bleeding us for every light second we took. Every time we entered a system, the human fleet was already leaving, having filled the system with minefields, drones, and jammers. We lost many light units like that, never mind the raids." "It was harrowing," he continued. "Imagine being on a battleship in the mighty assembled navy, almost untouchable unless the enemy has ships of equal size or a ship killer. Now imagine your friends and family on smaller ships dying to traps and hostiles that are gone before you can do anything about them. You are helpless, and they are dying." She noticed a new glint in his eyes. "That sounds... I don't have the words for it." "It's not so strange I retired after the war," he said. "Definitely not, sir. But why do you call it a debacle? The human fleet was destroyed in the Battle of Galatia 113, mostly due to your strategic genius." "Strategic genius?" he huffed. "Is that what they call sacrificing 10,000 lives to kill a fleet of 3 ships and their escorts? The only reason we got them into direct battle was because there was a dockyard with thousands of civilians they couldn't abandon. I lost 7 cruisers, 12 frigates, and most of my corvettes screen in that battle. Believe me, it wasn't a victory. It's a 30-year ceasefire." He sagged in his chair. "Believe me, Miss Herrick, you don't fight humans. Humans fight you." The cost of war. The room's quiet ambience contrasted sharply with the heavy memories Koku shared. Miss Herrick leaned forward, intrigued and sympathetic. "You mentioned the impact on your forces. How did the human tactics affect morale?" Koku sighed deeply. Morale was a complicated issue. Initially, our troops were confident. We had superior technology, better ships, and more experience. But as the campaign dragged on, the constant harassment and the inability to engage the enemy directly took a toll. Every jump into a new system brought fresh anxieties. More mines, more drones, more traps. She nodded. And what about the civilian populations in those systems? We tried to minimize collateral damage, Koku said, but the humans used that to their advantage. They would often leave behind civilian ships, making it difficult for us to use our full firepower without risking innocent lives. This strategy slowed us down even further and created internal conflicts about the ethics of our approach. That must have been challenging, Miss Herrick commented. It was. Our troops began to question the mission. They were trained for traditional warfare, not this prolonged cat-and-mouse game. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, striking quickly and disappearing just as fast. It was demoralizing. She took a moment to absorb his words. Can you tell me more about the key battles of the campaign? The Battle of the Ridge was a turning point, Koku said. We managed to corner a significant portion of the human fleet in a narrow star system. We thought we had them, but they had anticipated our move. They had rigged the entire system with explosives and drones. As we moved in, they detonated the charges, causing massive damage to our fleet. It was a costly lesson. And yet, you continued, she said. We had to. The assembly demanded results, and retreat was not an option. We adapted our strategies, trying to predict their moves, but it was never enough. The humans were always one step ahead. How did you eventually force the final confrontation at Galatia 113, she asked. It wasn't by choice, Koku admitted. As I mentioned, there was a dockyard with civilians. We had to make a stand. We couldn't allow them to evacuate without a fight. It was a brutal battle, with heavy losses on both sides. We managed to destroy their fleet, but at a great cost. She leaned back, considering his words. Looking back, what would you have done differently? Koku's feathers ruffled slightly as he thought. I would have pushed for more diplomatic solutions before the conflict escalated. We underestimated the humans' resolve and their ability to adapt. They turned their weaknesses into strengths, using their resourcefulness to outmaneuver us at every turn. Miss Herrick nodded thoughtfully. It sounds like the campaign was a lesson in humility. It was, Koku agreed. We learned that war is not just about firepower and technology. It's about strategy, adaptability, and understanding your enemy. The humans taught us that lesson the hard way. The human factor. Miss Herrick sensed there was more to Koku's story than just tactical details. You've spoken about the military aspects, but what about the psychological impact on both sides? Koku's expression grew somber. The psychological toll was immense. For our troops, the constant threat of ambush and the loss of comrades created a pervasive sense of fear and mistrust. We began to see the humans not just as enemies, but as relentless predators. And for the humans, she asked. The humans were fighting for their survival, Koku said. They were outnumbered and outgunned, yet they never gave up. Their resilience and determination were remarkable. They adapted quickly, learning from every encounter and using their ingenuity to level the playing field. This made them formidable opponents. Can you give an example of their ingenuity? She inquired. Koku nodded. One instance stands out. In the Battle of the Singularity, we expected a direct confrontation. Instead, the humans used a nearby black hole to their advantage. They lured us into a trap, using the gravitational pull to destabilize our formations, and then attacked when we were most vulnerable. It was a brilliant maneuver that caught us completely off guard. Miss Herrick was impressed. It sounds like they were always thinking several steps ahead. They were, Koku agreed. Their ability to anticipate our moves and exploit our weaknesses was uncanny. It forced us to constantly adapt and rethink our strategies. Did you ever interact directly with human commanders? She asked. A few times, Koku said. Commodore Ruth Bailey was a notable example. We communicated via encrypted channels during ceasefires. Despite the hostility, there was a mutual respect. She was a brilliant strategist and a tenacious leader. Our conversations were tense but professional. Did these interactions change your perspective on the conflict? She asked. Yes, Koku admitted. It humanized the enemy. We were no longer fighting faceless adversaries but individuals with their own hopes, fears, and motivations. It made the conflict more personal and in some ways more difficult. Miss Herrick paused, sensing the weight of his words. What do you hope others will take away from your experiences? I hope they understand the futility of war, Koku said. We lost countless lives and resources in a conflict that could have been avoided. The human campaign taught us the importance of diplomacy, understanding, and finding common ground. It's a lesson we must never forget. Reflections and lessons. The interview had delved deep into the war's complexities, but Miss Herrick felt there was still more to uncover. Koku, looking back, do you think the conflict with the humans changed the Draconis society in any significant way? Koku pondered this for a moment. Absolutely. The war forced us to reevaluate many aspects of our society, particularly our reliance on military might and our perception of other species. We had always viewed ourselves as superior, but the humans challenged that belief. They showed us that strength lies not just in technology or numbers, but in creativity, resilience, and unity. How did these realizations manifest in your society after the war? She asked. There was a significant shift towards diplomatic and cultural exchanges, Koku explained. We began to prioritize understanding and cooperation over domination. Our educational systems were reformed to emphasize critical thinking and adaptability. We also started to value alliances and partnerships, recognizing that mutual respect and collaboration could achieve far more than conflict ever could. Miss Herrick was intrigued. It sounds like the war had a profound impact on your civilization's growth and development. It did, Koku affirmed. We became more introspective, more willing to learn from our mistakes. The human campaign served as a catalyst for change, pushing us to evolve and adapt in ways we had never considered before. Do you believe the humans experienced a similar transformation? She asked. Koku nodded. From what I understand, they did. The war tested their limits and forced them to innovate and adapt rapidly. They emerged stronger and more united, with a deeper appreciation for their own capabilities. It also fostered a sense of camaraderie and solidarity among their people. Miss Herrick leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. Given the current state of relations between the Draconis and the federated systems, what do you see as the future for our two civilizations? Koku's eyes sparkled with hope. I see a future of cooperation and mutual respect. We've learned valuable lessons from our past conflicts, and I believe we're now in a position to build a better, more peaceful future together. By working together, we can achieve great things, exploring the cosmos, advancing our technologies, and enriching our cultures. That's an inspiring vision, Miss Herrick said with a smile. Do you have any final thoughts or messages you'd like to share with our audience? Koku took a deep breath, his gaze steady. Remember that true strength lies not in our ability to conquer, but in our capacity to understand and connect with others. Let the lessons of the past guide us towards a brighter, more harmonious future. And always strive for peace and understanding. With those words, the interview concluded. Miss Herrick felt a deep sense of admiration for the former Lord Admiral. His experiences and insights provided a valuable perspective on the complexities of war, the resilience of the human spirit, and the potential for growth and transformation. As she left Koku's study, she couldn't help but feel hopeful for the future of interstellar relations, guided by the wisdom of those who had lived through the trials of conflict and emerged with a renewed commitment to peace. The ripple effects. As Miss Herrick continued her exploration into the impact of the Gamma-Aquin cluster conflict, she'd found herself delving deeper into the societal shifts that followed. Koku's reflections had opened a new avenue of inquiry. She decided to visit some of the individuals who had lived through the war, both Draconists and human veterans, to gather a broader range of perspectives. Her first stop was a museum dedicated to the war on the Draconis homeworld. The museum, filled with artifacts, memorabilia, and interactive exhibits, was designed to educate future generations about the conflict. She met with the curator, a Draconis historian named Celia, who had been a young officer during the war. "Welcome, Miss Herrick," Celia greeted, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. "I'm glad you're interested in learning more about this period. It was a time of great hardship, but also great change." Celia led her through the exhibits, each one telling a different story. There were displays of the weaponry used by both sides, personal accounts from soldiers, and interactive simulations that allowed visitors to experience some of the campaign's pivotal moments. One of the most striking things about the war was how it exposed the vulnerabilities of our society, Celia said as they stopped in front of a large display featuring a detailed timeline of the conflict. "We were so confident in our superiority that we underestimated the humans' ability to adapt and challenge us." Miss Herrick nodded. "Koku mentioned that the war led to significant changes in Draconis society. Can you elaborate on that?" Celia gestured to a section of the museum dedicated to post-war reforms. "Certainly. After the war, there was a widespread recognition that our previous approach to diplomacy and conflict was outdated. The war highlighted the need for better understanding and communication with other species. We implemented new policies focusing on cultural exchange and collaborative projects with former adversaries." "How did these changes affect the Draconis people's views on humans?" Miss Herrick asked. Celia smiled. "The perception of humans shifted dramatically. What was once seen as a primitive, inferior species was now recognized for its ingenuity and resilience. Humans became symbols of adaptability and determination. This shift in perception fostered a greater sense of respect and curiosity towards them." Miss Herrick took note of Celia's insights. "And what about the veterans? How did their experiences shape their views on the war and its aftermath?" Celia's expression grew thoughtful. "Many veterans struggled with the memories of the conflict. The psychological toll was significant, and it took years for some to come to terms with their experiences. However, those who managed to find peace with their past often became advocates for better relations with humans. Their first-hand accounts of the humans' tactics and strategies were instrumental in reshaping our approach to interstellar diplomacy." As Miss Herrick concluded her visit to the museum, she felt a deeper understanding of the Draconis perspective. She planned to speak with human veterans next, eager to hear their side of the story. Human perspectives. Her next destination was Earth, where she met with Commander Ruth Bailey, the legendary figure who had led the human forces during the war. Ruth was now retired and living a quiet life, but her reputation still loomed large in the annals of military history. "Miss Herrick, it's a pleasure to meet you," Ruth said, extending a firm handshake. "I've heard quite a bit about your work." "Thank you, Commander Bailey," Miss Herrick replied. "I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me." They sat in Ruth's garden, surrounded by the serenity of nature, a stark contrast to the war-torn days of the past. Ruth was a woman of presence, her eyes carrying the weight of countless battles. "I've been speaking with Draconis veterans and historians," Miss Herrick began. "I'd like to hear your perspective on the war and its impact on human society." Ruth nodded, her gaze reflective. "The war was a defining moment for us. We were an underdog, facing a far superior enemy, but it was also a time of incredible growth and unity. The conflict forced us to innovate, to think outside the box, and to come together as a species." "How did the war affect the human military and civilian populations?" Miss Herrick asked. "The military underwent a significant transformation," Ruth explained. "We adopted new tactics and technologies, learned from every engagement, and developed a more adaptive and resilient force. The civilians, too, felt the impact. There was a collective effort to support the war effort, from manufacturing to intelligence gathering. It created a sense of shared purpose and solidarity." Miss Herrick was curious. Did the war change how humans view the Draconis? Absolutely, Ruth said. Initially, we saw them as an overwhelming threat. But as the war progressed, we began to see them as a formidable yet ultimately fallible opponent. Their strength and strategic capabilities were impressive, but they were not invincible. The war taught us that even the most advanced species can be challenged, and that diplomacy, rather than conflict, is the path to lasting peace. How did you personally cope with the war's challenges? Miss Herrick asked. Ruth's expression softened. It wasn't easy. Leading troops into battle and witnessing the loss of so many brave individuals was a heavy burden. But we held onto the belief that we were fighting for a greater good. The sense of duty and the support of my comrades kept me going. And of course, the hope that we could eventually find a way to coexist peacefully with the Draconis. Miss Herrick took a moment to absorb Ruth's words. What do you think the future holds for human-Draconis relations? Ruth's eyes brightened with optimism. I believe the future is promising. We've learned valuable lessons from our past conflicts, and there's a genuine desire on both sides to build a better relationship. By focusing on our shared goals and working together, we can achieve great things and avoid the mistakes of the past. Building bridges. As Miss Herrick wrapped up her interviews and research, she reflected on the insights she had gathered. The stories from both Draconis and human perspectives painted a complex picture of the war and its aftermath. The conflict had been a catalyst for profound change, shaping the way both civilizations approached diplomacy, cooperation, and understanding. She returned to her office, where she began compiling her findings into a comprehensive report. The report aimed to highlight the lessons learned from the Gamma Aquin cluster conflict, and it emphasized the importance of continued collaboration between species. In her closing remarks, Miss Herrick wrote, "The Gamma Aquin cluster campaign stands as a testament to the enduring spirit of both the Draconis and human civilizations. While the war brought immense suffering and hardship, it also served as a powerful catalyst for growth and transformation. Both sides emerged from the conflict with a deeper understanding of each other and a renewed commitment to peace." The experiences of veterans and historians alike reveal the importance of adaptability, innovation, and diplomacy. As we move forward, let us remember the lessons of the past and strive to build a future where cooperation and mutual respect are the cornerstones of interstellar relations. By embracing our shared history and working together towards common goals, we can create a brighter, more harmonious future for all. With a sense of accomplishment and hope, Miss Herrick submitted her report. She knew that the journey to understanding and reconciliation was ongoing, but the insights she had gained would serve as a valuable foundation for future efforts. As she looked out at the stars, she felt a renewed sense of optimism for the possibilities that lay ahead for humanity and the Draconis.